Today is Sunday, April 2nd, 2017. My name is David Bliss, and I'm interviewing Judge David Ayala for the Voces Oral History Project here in Brownsville, Texas. I just want to make sure you understand the interview will be housed at the Nettie Lee Benson Latin American Collection in Austin. If there's something you don't want to talk about, you don't have to. If there's something you do want to talk about and I don't ask, please do speak up. And finally, if you need to stop to use the restroom at any time, please say so. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So before we get started, I would like to ask you quickly just a broad overview question. The main topic of our interview today
Before we get started, let me make a comment that the interview is not in my official capacity as an immigration judge. I want you to know that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not here as a representative of the Department of Justice or anyone. I'm not here for that purpose.
Great. Thank you for letting us know. So the main topic of our interview today is the Reynaldo Garza School of Law. And so before we get started, I'd just like to ask you what your role in that was and what the Reynaldo Garza School of Law was.
The Reynaldo Garza School of Law was, of course, a private law school here in the Rio Grande Valley. My capacity with the law school was being, at one point, a board member, then the chairman of the board, and I was also a professor at the law school teaching immigration law.
So you were born in Pharr, Texas, is that right?
Yes, in 1949.
So tell me about growing up in the Valley.
It was typical of my neighborhood in the town that I grew up in. We all worked in the fields during the summers or worked at the local stores or cell monitors or anything like that, and grew up in high school. It was a very healthy environment, very friendly neighborhoods. So nothing remarkable about it at all.
Can you tell me what your father did or your mother, if she worked?
My father was born in Mexico in 1910. In 1915, during the Mexican Revolution period, my grandfather, who was born in 1873, brought the family to the United States. Back during that period of time, the immigration laws were not as complex as they are now. They would come to the ports of entry and register as intended immigrants, pay a small minimal fee according to our present standards now, which didn't amount to 25 cents, and they would register and come in as immigrants. So my grandfather brought the family over in 1915 and grew up there in Pharr, Texas. Then, of course, my father, during the Second War, the beginning of the Second War, was drafted into the Army. He served honorably in Europe during the Second War and was, released from the Army sometime around 1945, 1946. Then I came back to the hometown and with the GI Bill that they had, finished his schooling, became a bookkeeper, and worked at a local hardware lumber company and raised us.
Can you tell me how many siblings you had and what level of education they
there were four of us. My oldest sister, we call a sister, was actually a cousin whose mother had died at a very early age, and my mother raised her as a sibling. And then my older brother, born 1948, I was born 1949, and another sister born 1954. All of us lived there in Pharr. My oldest sister / cousin lives in San Antonio.
And did your mother have an education as well?
I know. My parents were, again, both of them born in Mexico. both of them immigrated to the United States. My mother was a housewife, raised the kids.
So growing up in the Valley, can you tell me a bit about what the schools you attended were like?
They were interesting because during that period of time there was a segregation. In the neighborhood that I grew up in, the elementary school, Buell School, was intended for Hispanics. And of course, from there, I went to, gosh, I forgot my other name of the school, but it was from 4th to the 6th grade. And from there, then I went to junior high and high school at Far San Juan Alamo, which was very exciting times during our high school periods. Very active in the school, the athletics, the clubs. Unbelievably, back then we thought, we were geniuses because we belonged to the slide rule club, and we thought that was the latest technology in math. Gee, you ask somebody to work a slide rule now, and they say, "What? What do you think you're thinking about?" You've got calculators to do all of that.
You mentioned your elementary school was segregated. Was your high school segregated as well?
No, not at all.
So do you remember any instances or specific cases where Mexican American students were treated differently in your high school than Anglo students?
No. Not in high school. We had great relationships, both with the Anglo and the Hispanics. I can't complain about that at all.
And were you very politically aware or active growing up?
No. I was quite naive, to be honest with you. My father never talked about politics. My mother never talked about politics. But my father always voted. I want you to know that. He was an Army veteran from the Second War, and he was very proud of it. I still have his uniform that I keep. I've got pictures of him from when he was in Europe during the Second War, during the campaign and stuff like that.
So speaking of your parents, what expectations did they have for you with your education?
Well, my father was very quiet. My mother was something else. Not getting an education was not an option. She made sure that we got an education. Whatever it took to get an education, we did. From far to Edinburgh, it's about maybe 10, 15 miles, where Pan American University was. And we only had one vehicle in the house, and of course that's the one that my father used. But I would always, walk over to the main artery and hitchhike every day to Pan American University. And at night, hitchhike back, and my mother would always have supper for us during that period of time.
So you lived at home while you were attending Pan American University?
Yes, the 1 year, first year. Mm-hmm. One thing about my mother during that period of time, she always made sure that I had a plastic bag with me, because she wanted to make sure that my books didn't get wet. She didn't care about me getting wet, but she wanted to make sure my books didn't get wet if it got caught in the rain. After the first year at Pan American, I joined the Texas National Guard, went to training at Fort Dix, New Jersey, got out of training, and during that period, my brother had just left to go to Dallas, to work in Dallas. My brother had gotten a technical training as a welder. So, funny, when you think back at these times, we didn't think anything unusual of this. But my brother would work a day shift and I would work a night shift. I would work with the Dallas Police Department as a police clerk during the midnight shift, and my brother worked during the day. We lived at a hotel. It was a one room, it was one bed, it had a small refrigerator, a small stove, and a small sofa. Yeah. And, he would sleep at night, I would sleep during the day, and it was unbelievable. We paid $25 a week at that hotel. Nowadays, you say $25, man, you can't get anything. You can't even sleep in the back seat of the car, for that kind of money. But we worked well. Our parents always taught us that half of the paycheck always had to go to the house. That was the same way that my father was raised, and to this date, I still have his pay stubs from the military, where half of his military pay would always go to my grandmother, and he would keep the other half for his monthly expenses. And my brother and I were, of course, not married, so half of our paycheck religiously always went to the house. And the other half, my brother and I would live on.
So your brother is older, correct?
1 year.
Can you tell me where you are in relation to your other siblings in terms of age?
Of course, I've told you that my oldest sister/cousin, she was born in 1939. My brother was born 1948, I was born 1949, and my biological sister was born in 54. So my brother was a year older than I was, a year older. And during that time, he was in Dallas. Then I got out of the military training, went to Dallas and started working with the Dallas Police Department. I worked there maybe 4 or 5 months. One Sunday, my brother said, "Hey, listen, the Highway Patrol, they're hiring people, but they have a requirement that you've got to be at least 5'8". If you're shorter than 5'8", you don't qualify." Oh, that's interesting. I said, I don't know where the Dallas Police Department's at. The Texas Highway Patrol office is in Dallas. I said, well, I'll take you there Monday. So I went to go there, and I applied. And within a matter of weeks, I got hired. They go through a written exam, you go through a physical exam. I was in great shape. I was very involved in athletics in high school. I had just gotten out of military training. So, push-ups, sit-ups, running was, a breeze for me. Okay? I was 20 years old at that time. And they had a class coming up in October of 1969. And since I was born in March, they thought about, whether to accept me or not, because I was 20 years old, and you can't carry a gun until you're 21. Okay? So, interestingly, they figured out, the class will graduate on the 27th or 28th of February. And then it'll be a week by the time I report from the academy to my duty station, and they figure, by then I will turn 21. So that's how it happened. When I graduated, everybody got their uniforms, everybody got their weapons except me. And they said, your weapon will be waiting for you when you get to your station. And sure enough, when I got to Freer, a small town here in South Texas, my weapon was there. I said, wow, interesting. And I worked with the Highway Patrol for 6 years. And during that period of time, I would travel from Freer, Texas to Corpus Christi, which is a good hour and a half to go to. Back then, the school was Del Mar College. and I was continuing my education toward a degree in criminal justice. I had 1 year of university work at Pan American, that first year I told you about. And then I started working part-time, and going to school part-time, working full-time with Texas Highway Patrol. Finally, started going to Texas A&I also in Kingsville. And then in 1975, I joined the United States Border Patrol and got stationed in McAllen, which was great for me because I said, well, I'll go back to school at Pan American, finish out my degree in criminal justice, which I did. I did very well. And during the time, of course, I was working with the Border Patrol. As soon as I graduated, I had gotten accepted into law school, and I was still quite naive of applying to schools because I didn't know the whole process. Partly because, I was working full-time, I didn't have enough time to investigate all this. So I applied only to one school. That was the University of Houston, which was great. I mean, Lord behold. Got accepted to law school. And it's a very interesting story going to Houston, because I had never been to Houston. I had submitted all my paperwork and everything, and the deadline for acceptance had already come and had gone. And that was on the Thursday or Friday of the week that I got called. And I was at home, and it just happened to be my day off from the Border Patrol. And it was, a little past noon, and I had just eaten lunch, and I was sort of down, and I told my mother, I didn't get accepted into law school, Mom. I said, don't worry, you'll get a call. I said, Mom, school started last week. I said, don't worry about it, God's going to help you. I said, I don't know, And sure enough, I was sitting there on the sofa, and the phone rings. Back then, you got old-time phones, picked up the phone. And I still remember the person calling. Her name was Nan Duhan. And she said, David Ayala? I said, yes. She said, this is Nan Duhan with the University of Houston Law School. I said, wow, helping me, And I said, yes. And said, well, if you're still interested in law school, you'll be here tomorrow. I said, whoa, tomorrow? There was a Monday at 1 o'clock for me to be in Houston at 8 o'clock in the morning. I had never in my life been to Houston, I said, okay, definitely I'll be there. I said, because if not, I'll call the next person on the list to get accepted. So, interestingly, I said, hey, Mom, I just got a call. Go to I said, great, see, I told you. I said, gosh, I need some money. And so I went to the bank, got $500 out of the bank, and took some checks with me. And I had a Dodge Colt. It was a small car, a green Dodge Colt. So I loaded up my jeans and a couple of shirts and some underwear. Yeah. And it was sort of late already, and I figured, well, I got to get going. So about 6, 7 o'clock at night, I told Mom, I'm leaving. I've looked at the map. I'm going to see how I get to Houston. I've never been to Houston. I don't even know where the law school is at, but I'm sure I'll find it by 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, I go up, and I say, man, I was getting sleepy. So I stopped, I think it's either George West or Three Rivers at a coffee shop. And back then, people use those bell-bottom shoes, pants, and the pockets were sort of low here. Well, Lord and behold, I went to the cafe, got out. By the time I got to Houston, I didn't have my money in my pocket anymore. I dropped it somewhere. I guess when I was sitting down or had gotten out or something. So I was in Houston with checks, no money. I said, oh man, how do I do this? So I pulled into the parking lot at the University of Houston and waited till the morning, and I looked around for where the registration was. I went over the registration and got some checks and paid them out.
So I wanna hear more about
Yeah.
what your experiences were in Houston, but first I want to make sure that we cover all our bases here. You traveled around quite a bit before you even graduated from college in the Valley. Was this common for your siblings or your friends to leave the Valley like that?
Yeah, my friends had said as soon as we graduated from high school, they were joining the military. They were moving up to Chicago to work at the factories. They were going off to schools. Yeah, that was common.
And when you were growing up, did you speak English at home?
No, not at home. No.
Was it common to speak Spanish among your friends at home?
Yeah, definitely. My mother didn't know any English. My father did, but we always communicated in Spanish. Right next door, my grandfather, also right next door to that, my aunts, my cousins, we all spoke Spanish.
Were you ever punished for speaking Spanish in school?
No, none.
Okay, so let's get back to Houston.
Maybe I was punished for speaking too much English, because maybe I talked too much, but...
So you got to Houston and you got some more checks.
I had the checks in my pocket, and I paid my tuition, and I kind of made friends with some guys from San Angelo, which fabulous guys. They lended me some money for the week, and finally, I was trying to get into the dorms, but they had no room in the dorms. So I said, man alive, what do I do? I said, well, slept in the car for a week there in the parking lot. It was interesting. I loved it. It's you're growing up. You got all this energy, and you don't think anything of it. You go to school. The gymnasium was there. You take a shot in the gymnasium, you work out, and you go to the library to study, go to your carrel areas and study, and you go eat a sandwich here, eat a sandwich there, whatever. At night, you go to your car and sleep in the back seat. It was interesting. Finally got into the dorms, and a bed, finally, and it was great. Then I had my 3 meals, so not a problem.
Were there many Mexican-American students in law school at the University of Houston?
Yeah, there were. There was a sizable amount. There was the Chicano Law Student Association. There was an association there. Now, of course, they call it the Hispanic Law Student Association, but back then, there was more of a radical environment that was prevalent, and Chicano this, Chicano that. But it's okay, it serves its purpose.
So after law school, you moved back to the Valley, correct?
Yes.
And you opened a private practice?
Exactly. I took the bar in February of 1981. I graduated in December of 80. Took the bar in February of 81. And you don't get your result until May. So from February to May, I worked at a law firm. And man, I got paid $50 a week. I said, whoa. I killed a guy, but it's okay.
That was a lot of money at the time?
No, it
Oh,
wasn't.
I see. Okay.
It was, but you know, I said, well, you know, you do what you got to do until you get your license. So I got my results, and as soon as I got my results, it was a Friday. I go to the courthouse and I tell the guy that I'm working for, hey, listen, I've got my bar results. Can you take me over to one of the district court judges so I can get sworn in? I said, wow, yeah, great, fabulous. Took me over there, and Friday afternoon, he threw a small party at the farm for me. I got some pan dulce and coffee, and we celebrated. He gave me a briefcase, which was worth more than what it would pay me per week. But I loved it. You know, I enjoyed it. And to this day, he's a very good dear friend of mine. As the time went by, the owner of that law firm became my daughter's godfather. My daughter's an attorney. You know. So I opened up my law firm on the Monday following the Friday after I got sworn in by myself. A lot of people don't do that. You know, they say, well, I got to get experience. I'll go with a law firm. I said, no. You know, I can work it.
Can you tell me a bit about practicing law in the Valley at the time and what kind of cases you took? Like, what's a typical case?
Well, I would take whatever came across that door in the office. And it was interesting times. There in Far, a cousin of mine had an old house that he turned into an office, and it was off the main drag. So I said, yeah, you know, come in, and he rented out 2 rooms to me. One of them was the front office, the other one was my office, you know. I thought that was kind of, and I put a sign outside, law office of David Ayala, and, you know, people just started walking in from the neighborhood. I would do real estate. I would do family law, divorces, wills, immigration. I would get court appointments. So I was always busy. There was always monies coming in. And I did all my work. I didn't have a secretary. I would work. And then I got married. Started having a family. And during that period of time, my son started having a lot of medical problems. I said, man, the medical bills were quite hefty. So I said, I got to do better than this. I got to get somewhere where insurance, I get some insurance. So I said, well, you know, I'll reinstate. But, you know, let me back up a little bit on that. When I graduated from law school, right before as soon as I took the bar, before I started working with my friend for $50 a week, I tried to reinstate back into the Border Patrol.
Can you tell me what reinstate means?
You know, I had worked with the Border Patrol 3 years before going to law school, and so at the 3-year mark, you're no longer a temporary status. You develop career status with the right to reinstate into your old position back. So as soon as I did that, took the bar, and before I started working with my friend, I attempted to reinstate back into the Border Patrol. And ironically, you know, the Border Patrol chief said, well, why do you want to reinstate? I said, well, I think I can have a good career with the federal government. And I said, but you're not going to stay as a Border Patrol agent. Well, of course not. You know, I'm going to move up the ranks and eventually at some point, you know, be at a management. They said, well, I can't reinstate you because you won't do any service to my station here because you intend to move up. And the mentality, how can you think like that? I've got a lot to offer the government. I can move up. I can, be in management. I can be an attorney. So they rejected my reinstatement. So then moving back up, I now open up my law firm, and moving up a little bit further, my son gets ill, medical bills coming in. So I was the chairman of the Unauthorized Practice of Law Committee for the Hidalgo Bar Association in 1983. And I was also the chairman, the local chairman for the American Immigration Lawyers Association, the local chapter. And I was setting up a meeting between the association and the immigration district director out of Harlingen. So I go there and we set up meetings to discuss different issues that the immigration attorneys had with the Immigration Service. And then we started talking and said, hey, tell me about your background. So I told him that history about the Border Patrol, wanting to reinstate, and he said, would you want to reinstate as an officer or as an attorney? I said, well, at this juncture, as an attorney, of course. I remember he turned around, picked up the phone, called Washington, and lo and behold, a week or two later, he said, I got a call, said, when do you want to start? I said, well, that is, service. So I think it was September the 30th or September the 28th, somewhere there. I started working in Harlingen as a trial attorney. There was a trial attorney section, had a supervisor. And, I was doing the immigration hearings, representing the Immigration Service, representing, all their needs, personnel problems, and so forth. And 2 years later, I become the supervisory attorney and had a staff and did very well. In 1988, between 1986 and 1988, I held two positions: the supervisory attorney for the Immigration Service here in the Valley, and a special assistant U.S. attorney doing the civil litigation for the Immigration Service in the federal courts. By 1988, things were a lot of work, a lot of litigation in the federal courts and everywhere. So I opted to take the position as a special assistant U.S. attorney full-time and relinquished my supervisory position as the attorney for the Immigration Service. And as such, I did a lot of litigation in Brownsville, the federal court in McAllen, did cases in the Fifth Circuit, oral arguments at the Fifth Circuit, oral arguments at the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. There were several published decisions. There were class action suits, all dealing with immigration matters, and also did cases representing FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. Did a lot of EEO cases, equal opportunity employment, representing the agency and so forth. During that time, I did a stint as an appellate counsel at the Board of Immigration Appeals got detailed over there to do the litigation for the government, representing the government before the Board of Immigration Appeals. There for a while, then of course she detailed back. And in 1993, got the immigration judge's position, working out of Harlingen, where I'm presently working. But before we get started with the immigration court, let me back up a little bit. 1986, I became a city commissioner, got elected as city commissioner, mayor pro tem for the city of San Juan, which is right next to FAR, okay, where I was born, by the time I was living in San Juan. And I was the city commissioner there for 3 years. During that period of time, I became part of Reynaldo Garza School of Law. And during that time, of course, also taught some classes at Reynaldo Garza. Then I became the chairman of the board for Reynaldo Garza, 1986, 1987, through that period. Okay. The school was going well. We were actively recruiting. We were trying to get accredited during that period. Now let me jump up a little bit over to the immigration judge, and I've been an immigration judge from 1993 to the present time. I've been also visiting judge all the way from New York to Guam, all of these courts. Been a board member at the Board of Immigration Appeals, so also detailed up there to be a temporary board member. But that's the extent of my professional career. My community involvement dealt with being a city commissioner, being the mayor pro tem, being at the law school, and being part of the law school, which now it's no longer in existence. But we had a lot of growing pains there. A lot of real good individuals who gave their time to try to make the school go. Some of them, I would say the great majority of them, are now deceased. But they all gave all they had to try to make the school go. And there's a lot of history there because through the time that we were growing, there was Pan American University. And when Reynaldo Garza came into existence, it came into existence because of a loophole that did not require the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to approve the school. We were a corporation. And by God, when we became known, we became a corporation when we started working. The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, in conjunction with some other people, political positions, go to the Texas Attorney General's office and wanted to shut us down. We got cease and desist orders for us to close our school down. I said, no, we're not going to do that. We're rightfully a school. There was a loophole that we got in. So they had to eat crow. They couldn't stop us from going forward. Well, there's always a another method that people can try to block you. And we struggled, and there was, of course, a law that permitted a private institution to merge with a public institution. And of course, there was Pan American University. And we started very well. Everybody was hyped up about the school, and everybody was excited about it, and it was growing. It was going very well, very well. So I set up some meetings with the board, the Regents, Board of Regents for Pan American University, because I wanted to talk about the merger between Reynaldo Garza and the schools, Pan American. And of course, Pan American got excited about it and met in a couple of meetings, and they said they approved the marriage, to get in there. We would turn, of course, our assets over to Pan American, but in the meantime, they said, well, move over to our main campus, bring your library over to our library, and then we'll work on the merger, to merge the corporation into the public institute. And it was going very well. It was going very well. So we would use the classrooms at Pan American. In the evenings, we moved our library to their library. During this period of time, there was, because I can't prove this, but the feedback that we were getting was that because University of Texas system and the Texas A&M system, we're going to lose some federal fundings because of their minority enrollment was not up to what it should be. Well, these two systems, which are the main systems in the state of Texas, started courting all the border schools, University of El Paso, UTEP, at Laredo also, Pan American University, Brownsville, Kingsville, Texas A&I. So there was a big to-do as far as the advertisement in the valley and
Was this happening at the same time as the Lulac v. Richards case?
I don't remember.
The late 1980s?
What?
Late 1980s?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, during that period of time, exactly. During that period of time. We had a meeting, a final meeting with the board, the Pan American, and they were going to merge Pan American with the University of Texas because it would benefit them more to be part of the UT system and get their fundings. And I remember I said, why do you want to do that? You're already a state institution. You're getting funds from the state because you're a public institution. If we merge the law school here, it'll even grow bigger. So you don't need the monies from the University of Texas. You still are going to get it from the state anyway. Well, no, because we'll have access to their education system, their programs, and one thing to another, we got booted out. They said, well, you got a certain period of time to move your library out. So that it was a hassle trying to move our library out of their library after we had moved our library in there.
So had the merger between Reynaldo Garza and Pan American, you had physically moved in prior to the UT Pan American merger?
Correct.
And you were making preparations
we were making preparations to relinquish our corporation and merge it into the institute.
And you think the Pan American UT merger had something to do with
Oh, no question
UT?
about it. No question about it. The voting, the comments were being made in the newspaper, and people were all excited about the University of Texas courting Pan American.
And you think the University of Texas wanted to do this to boost their minority enrollment?
Yeah, that is my opinion. Of course, I can't say, here in writing, this is what it shows, and these are statistics, but that was the...
So getting back to, just so we're clear on the timeline, the founding of Reynaldo Garza and the reason why it was created. When you first came to practice law in the early 1980s in the region, was there a shortage of lawyers in the Valley, and were most lawyers from the Valley?
Sure, that's a shortage. And if you wanted to go to law school, the nearest law school was San Antonio, St. Mary's.
Were many lawyers in the Valley from the Valley familiar with the community, or did they mostly come from outside?
I couldn't tell you. But I just know that if you wanted to go to law school, you had to move out of the Valley.
And during your time with the Immigration Service, were many of the attorneys serving alongside you, were they Mexican American, or were they mostly Anglo?
When I was a Border Patrol agent, or when I was the district counsel?
I suppose both.
Well, when I was a Border Patrol agent, the attorneys that were practicing immigration law were limited. Of course, there was Laurier McDonald, there was Jones and Crane, there was Leonel Perez, there was Lisa Bordiaga. There was just a handful of attorneys that practiced. Bob Sanchez, just Arnulfo Guerra over there in Rio Grande City. But when you look at the percentage of attorneys doing immigration compared to the attorneys doing criminal, civil, family law, at very limited amount. And then, of course, when I became the district counsel, all of the attorneys that we had, it was divided equally, both Anglo and Hispanics, and half were from here, and the other half were from out of the Valley.
So you've worked quite a few, or during this period, you were working at quite a few different places. Did you notice your relationship with the community change noticeably when you were a private practice versus when you were a judge or working for the Immigration Service?
Oh, there just weren't enough hours in the day. Having to get up early in the morning, having to travel from where I lived. Back then I was living in San Juan. And we would, as an attorney, before being a judge, I would have to travel all the way to Port Isabel, because that's where the majority of the cases were being. That took an hour and 20 minutes over there, and another 20 minutes back home. And as soon as I get home, I'd have something to do with the city commission, or had something to do with the law school. And it was 10 o'clock at night, 11 o'clock at night by the time I got home. And, I was newlywed, It was rough.
So, speaking specifically about the founding of Reynaldo Garza, we found some conflicting information about what year it was founded. Can you clarify for me what year it was established?
I don't remember. I just remember that sometime in 1986, I started becoming active with it. My understanding that it had just been created, maybe 84, 85, somewhere there.
And can you tell me why it was founded?
Well, that's obvious. That's an obvious question because of people seeing a need for a law school in the area because the people that wanted to become attorneys would have to travel to San Antonio. Of course, there's an economic situation there that, having to travel to San Antonio, the room and board and all that. While if you had a school here in the Valley, well, you could live at home, you could get out of graduate, not a Penn American, and then you could go into law school.
Can you tell me the names of who founded the school?
That was Ed Jerusa. Ed and I go back many, many years because we worked with the Border Patrol together, and then he was afterwards. He became one of the founders. The others, I don't remember. I got a copy of the Articles of Incorporation that I brought, so you can review them. But I know that when it got started and it just been founded, Ed asked me, "Hey, listen, we just started the law school. Do you want to join as a board member?" I said, "Sure."
So, speaking more about the founding, you mentioned that it was started via a loophole.
Yeah.
Was there anyone in the Valley community, whether lawyers or otherwise, who opposed to how this was done, or were there any rumors or attempts to start an opposing law school using that same loophole?
Here in the Valley, no. Of course, there was some opposition. Interestingly, I'm not going to mention these names, but I remember some Hispanic attorneys saying that, "Oh, we don't need any more Hispanic attorneys." I said, "What? What's wrong with you?" I don't know if it was because they didn't want any more competition or heaven knows, but I thought that was a very dumb thing to say. I don't think that they would say it openly, public, in front of anybody else, but we heard about that, and we know who was saying it.
Although you weren't there from the beginning of the law school, do you have an idea of what kind of work is involved with founding a law school from scratch like that?
Well, back then, of course, was setting up a corporation. So it's no big thing setting up a corporation. Just you put the articles of incorporation. You put the goals of what the corporation is intended to do, and then to establish the law school, you need a physical facility. You need the library, and you need to get your professors, and of course your professors have got to be qualified. You need a dean of academics. You need the president of the corporation to run the corporation on a daily basis. You need the board members to set the policy and the tone. And then the president enforce that, and then the president tell the dean, and the dean being independent as far as academics are concerned from the business aspect of it. So that's totally mechanical. So it's not a big thing to do that. And back then, you could establish a corporation with that purpose.
Do you remember if anyone on the board had experience in administration of a law school, or were you all just practicing lawyers and judges?
No, when you start out the law school, you look before you put it into play. You put all the people in place to be able to start it. And we got Dean DeMoss, who was a former dean of a law school up north. we recruited him, and he came over. He was the first dean. He was very knowledgeable, knew everything. We recruited professors with a lot of experience, and they exactly knew what needed to be done. Of course, the board, as far as setting the policy, the business policies and stuff like that, that's not a big thing. That's nothing magical about it. The magical is, of course, having a good dean in place that knows about the academics of the law school, having the professors that have the experience in teaching the courses. That's is sometimes hard to get because it's all economics. How much are they going to get paid, and will they work for that pay that we're starting out?
So you became involved in the mid 1980s. Is that correct?
About 86.
86. How did you get contacted and how did
Like
you
I told you,
involved?
Ed Jerusa was one of the founders. And Ed and I go way back to the 70s with the Border Patrol. And he asked me if and then I was a city commissioner, mayor pro tem in the city of San Juan. So, I had a little bit of political clout, local as it was, and as small as it was. It's nonetheless a little bit of a political influence in the local community that could enhance the recruitment, and also the stature of the school, who's on the board, and all of that stuff.
So the law school lacked some of the resources of other law schools in the state.
No question about it. It's when you start, you don't have all of the professor emeritus, all of the professors that have been known to write books and stuff like that. Of course, when you start out, it's hard to convince a renowned professor, hey, come over, help us start the law school. No, that's obvious.
Can you tell me any strategies the school employed to sort of get around these limitations of limited resources?
Well, not a plan strategy. Let's follow all these steps. Made calls. We got Dean DeMoss. Dean DeMoss had contacts with professors that he had in the past worked with. So, Dean DeMoss would notify the board, hey, listen, I've contacted these individuals. We need some funding. We need this, we need that. So, and then the board would approve that stuff.
Did other lawyers in Texas take students from Reynaldo Garza seriously? Did other lawyers in Texas take graduates from Reynaldo Garza Law School seriously? Do you think there was a reputation or opposition?
No. At the beginning, no. Of course not. Any big law firm, if you don't come from a renowned school, of course not. They're not going to take you in. A lot of our graduates, of course, had to pave the road for others coming behind them to establish a reputation of the law school. The reputation of the law school just doesn't happen overnight. Reputation of a law school comes with the alumni, what they do, what they achieve, and so forth. They're the ones that enhance the law school.
So you talked a bit about the relationship with Pan American University, and I had mentioned LULAC v. Richards. What was Reynaldo Garza's involvement with LULAC v. Richards?
Are you talking about Judge Reynaldo Garza or the law school?
Oh, I'm sorry, the law school.
Oh, okay. I don't recall any active involvement with them at all. But let's back up a little bit, okay? When we got ousted out of Pan American. This is interesting because I called the boards, the people from Texas A&I. And I knew that Texas A&M was courting Texas A&I. And the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board always denied Texas A&M a law school. I knew that. And I knew that if we would come in with Texas A&I, okay, and we would establish the law school there, we would establish the law school there, and then if Texas A&M takes it over, they would take it over with a law school. And Texas A&M was in favor of that. So they were working behind the scene and sort of encouraging that. So we met with the board regents for Texas A&I, with help, of course, Representative Rangel from Corpus Christi, Carlos Truan during that period of time, Eddie Lucio. And there was a red carpet, not actual red carpet, but the red carpet treatment, because they wanted Reynaldo Garza to merge with Texas A&I, because they knew that once we merged, then of course when they merged with Texas A&M, and A&M was on board, they knew about it, and they would automatically get a law school when they had been denied a law school for years. Our understanding that as it was developing, we were told that the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board had gotten wind of the behind-the-scenes plan for Texas A&M to get the law school. So they said no. Said if A&I merges with Reynaldo Garza, they would not approve the merger with Texas A&M and Texas A&I. So Texas A&I, said, we're sorry.
And this all happened after
Right after Pan American. It was during that period of time, immediately right after that rejection from Pan American, we immediately set up to go trying to get Texas A&I.
And that didn't work out either.
No, but we did something else also. We said, well, we're a corporation. We started making plans of, how are we going to? So we thought about maybe merging with El Paso, because University of Texas was trying to merge with the El Paso, but that thought went out the window because we were rejected by Pan American, because Pan American was told that there will only be one law school for the University of Texas, and that is at Austin. See? So we knew that Texas was courting El Paso, so that became. So I said, well, we're a corporation, we can develop subsidiaries. And we developed a subsidiary in Fort Worth, okay, at the Fort Worth School of Law. We developed it over there, okay? And we then transferred our library over to the subsidiary. It was a little bit expensive sending all those books over there. And of course, the Reynaldo Garza main corporation with a subsidiary, we would have meetings with the subsidiary corporation and make plans and directions. Well, during that period of time, Texas Fort Worth School of Law started growing. It started growing very nicely. But it wasn't to the point that it would be sufficient to sustain both the subsidiary and Reynaldo Garza, because we were getting funds because it was a subsidiary of the main corporation. We were getting funds from the subsidiary. So we opted to approve a merger of the school, Fort Worth School of Law, with Wesleyan University. And Lord behold, Wesleyan University has a law school. And that's the law school that was a subsidiary of Reynaldo.
So the subsidiary of Reynaldo Garza is now affiliated with A&M.
No, Wesleyan.
Oh, Wesleyan. But is A&M not merging with Wesleyan?
I have no idea.
Oh, okay.
have
I
no
thought I'd
idea.
read that in the news. Okay.
But Wesleyan University has had a law school for a number of years. And that law school was the Fort Worth School of Law, the subsidiary of Reynaldo Garza.
You mentioned the Higher Education Coordinating Board. Were there any other particular political opponents in Austin or elsewhere in the state?
Heaven knows. I have no personal knowledge of that. But obviously we had political friends, yes. Now who the political opponents were, I couldn't tell you. Our political friends were Irma Rangel, Eri Lucio, Carlos Truan. They would get waivers for our graduates to be able to sit for the bar pending accreditation from the ABA.
Can you tell me a bit about what the waiver process looks like?
No, that the waiver process is nothing. It's just a bill that's put before the state legislature saying, that the graduates of Reynaldo Garza would be able to sit for the bar during this period of time, pending accreditation.
Do you know what the last year that waiver was allowed?
I don't remember.
Dan Frank, one of the co-founders of the school, had...
No. Back up. Not a co-founder.
Oh.
He was one of the members of the board of directors. He came in afterwards.
He
was like me. He was in there after I came in. Now, when you talk about co-founders, you're talking about the people that put the corporation together. Yeah.
He had mentioned at some point when there was controversy about the waivers and the accreditation that he had felt the ABA's accreditation requirements were elitist, and I'm wondering what you think about that, or what you thought about it at the time.
No. The ABA is the ABA, and they're there for a good purpose, and their standards are great. I mean, that I can't criticize that. And nobody should be criticizing the ABA for having the standards that they do, because they put out they monitor the schools and make sure that the schools put out quality education, and so no the ABA is I don't think they should be touched in any way or form or fashion. It just I brought in a feasibility study that we had. We paid. The law school paid quite a bit of money for it, so that we could follow that plan and comply with all of the ABA requirements. And you certainly don't want a law school that is not accredited by the ABA, because that's the standard. You got to meet the standard, and if you don't meet the standard, then then you're putting out individuals that are not qualified to be attorneys.
So in the early 1990s, the state actually began denying these waivers, or failing to pass the bills to grant the waivers.
Correct.
Can you talk a bit about why you think they did this, either their stated reason or what your thoughts on it are?
Maybe they were just frustration that things were not moving the way they should have, or the progress of the school was not there. There's a lot of undercurrents also that come into play that I wouldn't know about.
We have heard somewhat conflicting information about the rate at which Reynaldo Garza students actually passed the bar when they were given waivers. At the time, the state had said that they were passing the bar at about a rate of 25%.
It was of all the Texas law schools, of course, we were at the lower end, no question about it. But that's to be expected when a school is in its infancies, trying to get a reputation that would draw quality professors that would develop your students. That's a given. Any school that starts from the beginning, it'll have its growing pains. That's Reynaldo Garza had them also.
Did the school have any plans to? I mean, all of this was happening after the failure to merge with Pan American
and Texas A&I.
And were there plans to keep going?
By that time, we were choked. The mergers were out of the question. Our waivers were no longer coming in. So, you can't advertise saying, come to our school because you graduate from there, and then you say, well, now what? I can't even take the bar exam. So you got to offer the public something for their money. And if we couldn't offer an opportunity to take the bar, and we could only offer the law courses, well, I go 3 years to law school, and you're looking to take the bar to be able to practice, and we couldn't offer that. It became a squeeze, a boa constrictor, squeezing us toward no life, and that's what happened.
So, despite the ultimate squeeze that you talk about, the school did graduate quite a few lawyers. Are there any
about 100 of them. Yeah.
Are there any that went on to do particularly important work in your view?
Oh, yes. Johnny Guerra became a district attorney for Willacy County. Fred Garza, Jay Palacios, Arnold Cantu, Rudy, there are 4 county courted law judges, and of course a district attorney. There's one that went to our law school, graduated. I don't think that he ever decided to take the bar, but he graduated. Omar Lucio, who is the sheriff here in Cameron County, here in Brownsville. And there are others, that, of course, Dan Frank, of course, Amado Robledo, also was one of our board of directors after he graduated. Very successful attorney, but at one point became the president of the school. Very successful attorney, as I have indicated, and others that also have done well.
Now, obviously, the merger of the University of Texas and A&M throughout the rest of the state kind of adversely affected Reynaldo Garza Law School, but do you have an opinion on whether the merger...
Considerably.
Do you have an opinion on whether the merger has helped the Valley region?
It's helped the educational programs there, the undergraduate, of course. But as far as the graduate programs, I think it denied that opportunity. Denied it. Maybe the timing of it wasn't there. Maybe the general populace didn't find a need to support more graduates programs down here. When you talk about the 80s compared to now, just look at the volume of high school graduates that are going into undergraduate programs, and the standard now, having an undergraduate degree is, not a place to stop. You got to go into the graduate programs in order to become successful. And now, I guess if Reynaldo Garza was today, I think that the people will definitely support that, because they're not. You hear talks now of well, we need a law school. We need a law school. Back then, there was also the 80s. Well, why can't we have a medical school? Why can't we have a medical school? And medical schools are now coming in. Texas A&M, other schools are coming in. Medical schools coming into McAllen. See, but maybe back then the public didn't think there was a need, or there just wasn't enough support for it. And maybe the timing was not the right time for the law school.
Have there been more recent efforts to bring a law school to the Valley?
What's that?
Have there been more recent efforts to bring a law school
I
to
have
the Valley?
not been involved with it any longer. I had other things that I've gotten involved in, and my public service, I guess, time and periods have been exhausted and been relinquished to younger individuals that are more active and have a lot more energy than I do. At this juncture in my career, just I'm not, don't have the energy to do that.
Do you have an opinion on whether UT Rio Grande Valley will be getting a law school anytime soon?
Well, I don't think that UT will ever relinquish its dominance, and I don't think they'll ever set up a satellite. The University of Texas is the University of Texas, and there's no question about it. That's the flagship of the state. And the quality of professors that they have is tremendous. Just like the University of Houston, the quality of professors they have is tremendous.
And finally, is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Just regrets that I didn't have more energy and more intelligence and more political influence to have made a bigger wave of this. I tried to make the waves, but my paddle was not big enough to create that.
Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, thank you.